Today, I want to set the rules or the ideas behind how many immigrants or refugees a country should let in, and kind of use those to apply it to Korea's current situation with Yemeni refugees. So here are the three quick, fast, easy rules for how many refugees or immigrants a country, a developed country, should let in. Number one, how similar is the country of origin that these refugees are coming from culturally to your own country? Number two, what is the population of your country? How big is your country? And then finally, number three, how good is your country at generally accepting and assimilating foreign people from foreign cultures into your own culture? So the first one is how close culturally are the people who are coming into your country? The way I see it is like, if you look at a country, so let's put in the frame of Korea. If you're looking at a country like Japan, how many immigrants or refugees can Korea absorb from Japan? It's probably a lot more than, say, Yemeni or Syrian or other Middle Eastern countries, just because Japan and Korea are very similar culturally. Despite having a kind of very shaky and terrible and bad history, they're still very close culturally. I mean, just look at the language. I mean, Korean and Japanese are so close that anyone who's Korean who's tried to learn English and tried to learn Japanese realizes, wow, it's a lot easier to learn Japanese than it is to learn English. And the reverse is true too. If you had a bunch of Japanese immigrants coming into Korea, they would be able to, I want to say, pretty easily and quickly learn the language almost flawlessly. Other cultural things, I mean, they're generally, I don't know, clean in the same manner as Korean people. The biggest difference will be, Korean people bow this much and Japanese people bow that much, and things of that nature. So it's almost unnecessary to describe how close Japan is culturally to Korea. We know that they're very close, and as such, I think it's a lot easier and it makes a lot more sense for Korea to be able to take in a lot more Japanese immigrants than they could Yemenis immigrants. I mean, I think as far as how close two cultures are, how close two countries are culturally, Yemen and South Korea are probably just about as far as you can get. So that makes it very hard to take in those kind of refugees. The second thing is, how big is your country? Now, this is a thing where, America is a giant country. I mean, the third most populous country in the world. So we're able to take in a lot of immigrants, a lot of refugees. If you look at a country like Luxembourg, I think it's like 600,000 people. They could take in a lot fewer. I mean, if you took in 10,000 immigrants into America and 10,000 into Luxembourg, if you really, especially if you spread them across America, if you don't even need to spread them off evenly, just put them in the big cities in America evenly. Nobody would be none the wiser, nobody noticed, nothing would change about America at all. But if you did that in Luxembourg, it'd be noticeable if the next day there were 10,000 new people. So you can see how the size of a country influences how many immigrants or refugees that country can let in. Finally, if you look at something, and here's the big thing, how good is any given country at assimilating foreigners, at assimilating immigrants and refugees? Now, I'm going to brag right now and say America is probably the best in the world at it. Mostly because we have a lot of practice. In every American, there's somebody, almost every American, I don't want to go too extreme on this, but almost every American has some ancestor within the last 300 or 400 years who comes from another country. We're all immigrants, and we've had a lot of practice bringing in immigrants. And as such, we are able to take in a lot more immigrants and refugees, even percentage-wise, I think, than other countries. Just from my experience living in San Diego, where there's a high Hispanic population, high amount of Mexican people who have come into San Diego, you could see that there are some Mexican people who they're ethnically Mexican, but they don't even speak Spanish anymore. There's actually a funny word for it, which is called pocho, which means an ethnically Mexican person who doesn't speak Spanish. And you could see that, generally in America, the rule of thumb is grandkids no longer speak the language of their immigrant grandparents. And you can also see with a lot of kyopo that you could meet in America, which is, I've met, I don't know, I never remember the nomenclature, first generation, second generation, but I've met Korean people whose parents are Korean, and they themselves were born in America and raised in America. And their Korean skills are not perfect. They're way better than me, but they're not perfect, and they almost want to kind of shed their Korean identity. For better or for worse, they kind of want to shed it because they want to be included in the American culture. And maybe that's a result of some kind of racism against them. I honestly think it is. But the end result is they end up assimilating and becoming American very quickly. And their kids, the grandkids of the initial immigrants, they don't speak any Korean. They know very little bit about Korean culture. For better or for worse, they end up being American 100%. I'm not so sure. I only know like from other people's stories, but I've heard not such great things about immigrants in Europe where they stick to their culture and they stick to their language and they don't assimilate very well. I don't know if that's the country's fault or whatever, but the point is America is very, very good at accepting immigrants and assimilating them into our culture. And I'm not sure if Korea really is. Partially because Korea has had a short period of time in which the country has been properly developed and rich, that I don't know if there's been a huge demand for immigrants to come into Korea until very recently. So I think Korea is actually not very good at assimilating people from other countries, especially from other countries that have very different cultures. So the real thing I'm trying to say, the real thing I'm trying to get to is that these three criteria, these three guidelines, they're probably not the only ones, but they are a way to measure how many refugees and how many immigrants an industrialized, rich country should let in. And within them, there's no hard, fast rules. This isn't math. I don't know what the population of your country needs to be before you let in X amount of refugees or immigrants. The idea of how good a country is at assimilating immigrants or refugees is all of this stuff is very debatable. All of it's to some degree subjective. And my point is that there has to be a discussion around these three ideas and probably other ideas I haven't even mentioned in this video. There's a huge amount of debate and a huge amount of thinking that has to go into this before we can answer the question of how many refugees or how many immigrants Korea should let in. That being said, this group of 400, that's a pretty small amount of people. And it's actually distracting from the real question because, yes, Korea could probably easily take in these 400 Yemeni refugees. It would probably help the refugees tremendously, and those 400 refugees probably would have very little harm on Korea as a society. Probably wouldn't mess things up very much at all. But it's not a question of really just these 400. The real question is, what is Korea's policy going to be in the future? How many per year? You also don't want to set incentives that make it so that a bunch of Yemeni people and other people from other poorer countries, less industrialized, developing countries, want to come into Korea and they realize, whoa, I just got to buy a ticket and Jeju Island has this visa-exempt policy for us so we can get into Jeju, claim refugee status, and then get into the rest of Korea. Like, all of these things have to be thought about. So these 400 guys, in my opinion, I don't think they're a big problem. The real problem is, what is Korea's plan for the future for immigrants? And what is Korea's plan for the future for refugees? Korea is now a rich, developed country, which makes it a very desirable place for someone from an underdeveloped country to want to immigrate and become a refugee in. So it's time for Korea to start thinking about that. And you know what? To some degree, every industrialized country, every developed country has some ethical and moral duty to help those from underdeveloped countries because life isn't fair. And if you get born in Korea, you have many better opportunities in life than you do if you were born in an underdeveloped country. So there is the responsibility, I think, of Korea and every industrialized country to let in a certain amount of refugees, a certain amount of immigrants. The real question is how many? So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you hate this video, give it a thumbs down. If you love me or you hate me, of course, hit the subscribe button. This video is, yes, it's going to be a little controversial, and I really hope it sparks with somebody, even if it's 5 people at a surgery, the idea of how many refugees, how many immigrants is Korea going to start letting in, not just this year, but in the future. What's going to be Korea's general strategy for immigrants and refugees going into the future? So if you agree with me or you disagree with me, of course, leave comments. Remember, I've also started a chat room for anyone who watches my videos. Go in there, I'll see everything you say. I'll try to respond to everything you say. There's other viewers in there who are also talking and chatting, so you can get to them. Yeah, so remember, these videos come out every Friday at 7 p.m., so it's after 7 p.m. You should check out my new video, and of course, the most important thing of all, have a super most awesome day.
창화 그리고 김유리 덕분에 저는 이런 영상을 만들 수 있습니다.
여러분의 지원 덕분에 이번 영상을 제작할 수 있었습니다.